everybody. Welcome back to the Consummate Athlete Podcast. I'm Molly Herford, and when I'm not recording this podcast or writing all about endurance, sport, and adventure, I'm hopefully outside doing some endurance, sport, or adventure.
And I'm Peter Glassford. I'm a registered kinesiologist and an endurance coach, and you are here on the Consummate Athlete Podcast, where we looks at all different types of movements and the people that do them and coach them and study them, and we try and pull that back into things you can use in your own movements and daily life.
Solid 80% on that one.
Well, there was a little bit of a slip up there, but caught ourselves.
You do often say 80% is a passing grade.
Turned it into a sexy dance.
Oh boy. Anyway, what's new this week?
Well, we were down in Ocean City, Maryland, not for the car racing thing that randomly was happening.
Yes, if any listeners were at the car racing thing,
Good for you.
Yeah. Apologies for how much I made fun of you.
Well, not
this
car
weekend.
racing. I mean, it was interesting. It turned out being sort of just an interesting thing to talk about and some loud car noises. But yeah, there was I guess it was like an unofficial car rally of sorts. There wasn't really racing per se going on. But
And how do you describe the cars that were
I don't know, like
involved in it?
tuner cars maybe or something, right? It was a mix of sort of the 1980s and 1990s Honda Civic with wing, sort of rusting out all the way up to... There wasn't really anything super, super fancy, but, like a Porsche or something. Nothing like really exotic, I don't think.
Imagine if people, like 20-year-olds, tried to do the Fast and the Furious in real life. But
to each their own.
But
they were outside. That's what I said.
You know what?
They weren't on
Yeah.
the social media so much, so they were outside doing stuff.
Yeah, it's true. So that was an interesting experience.
But we were there for the beach. We didn't just sit there on the porch the whole time.
No. It also turned out, though, Ocean City is not maybe the best place for running trails or hills. Pretty pancake flat, and the only trails are the beach. It's a trail, kind of. So that was an interesting weekend of kind of figuring out how to work training in. I've also realized in my old age, I've come to the conclusion that it's okay when you need an extra rest day every now and then.
Yeah, that's good, especially when life gets in the way as it does.
Mm-hmm. I think that's actually like one of the biggest things I've learned this year is like we say it all the time and everyone would generally agree with it that like life stress actually does feed into athletic stress. But I think it's easy to say that, from your high horse of like, I'm currently holding it all together and getting all my training in. But it's a very different thing to realize like, oh, like life stress and travel and everything is so much so that no, I actually do need to, tap out for some workouts or cut some short or take an extra day off because I'm cracked from life.
Yeah, I don't know. I think sometimes when we phrase it as like, oh, there's this life stress, there's the training stress and the life stress and it all like is the same. And I think that sometimes is like hard for people to accept or to even just fathom what that means, right? But I think if you think about it as like, you have like energy, you only have so much energy in a day, you can only do so much. So if you're moving your house, like that obviously takes energy, you're lifting things. Mm-hmm. If you're running all around or, maybe on the flip side, you didn't sleep very well or, you've been out doing whatever, or you didn't eat great, then like you'll have less energy for the day, right? And so sort of that like energy balance sometimes is maybe a way to think about it. Or even just decision making, I think, if you think about you have so many decisions you can make in a day. Mm-hmm. Where I think everyone's been there, right? Like you've been at work, it's been super hectic, you've been making big moves, big choices, then it's like the second you get home and you have to decide like red shirt or blue shirt for the run, it's just like, I can't run. It's over, right? Yep. So I think that's where sometimes, there's the sort of cliche hacks of laying stuff out or having, maybe that's where a coach comes in where like there isn't a choice on what workout to do, maybe it's sort of there.
Yeah, and actually it's funny. I interviewed Katerina Nash last week kind of about her World Cup win at Waterloo and honestly her longevity in the sport. We've had her on the podcast before talking kind of about all things cyclocross, mountain bike, cross country ski. She's awesome. If you haven't listened to that episode, go back and listen to it. But we talked a bunch about she's been working with the same coach for 18 years now. And we talked about kind of the importance of that not having to make that decision of what the right workout for you is that day and, what the correct thing to do is and, avoiding that decision fatigue and how much that can be really helpful, both from a super high level, but then we also talked about it for sort of the more busy executive type person. Or, even if you're not a busy executive, but you just are, trying to improve your training and just don't really know what exactly to do, it can be really stressful to try to be playing a pretty big guessing game, I think.
Yeah, and I think I as I've gotten older, I think I've just gotten comfortable. I'll go and do something most days, but there'll be what's in the plan, and if I get out there and it's just like I'm not super into it or energy doesn't seem like it's there, then I'll sort of do, like, I can pretty much do 90 minutes, but some days it's 30. And I'll just do something, right? And then at least it's done, and then I'll sort of move on from there and sort of readjust. And sometimes that means trying the intensity again the next day or two later, and sometimes it just means moving on, right? And being happy, just making sure that the next time I'm supposed to do intensity, I actually do it, so that I get one in the week, right? And I've sort of come to terms that, like, it's not 3 times anymore, like when I was 18 and I could sort of just recover and hit it again and then go for it. It's sort of, a lot of times it's just busy, and if I can get one good one that sort of simulates, or approaches some of those race-like situations or whatever I'm trying to get better at, usually that's some sort of like sprinting or just, the critical moment for mountain biking is usually in that first lap. So it's just, if I can feel that once a week and then sort of maintain endurance and coordination and stuff, then often that's as good as it gets, right? And
So I think that all leads into one of the questions we were going to talk about today, and I was going to put it lower in the show, but I think we might as well kind of hit it now.
Segue it nicely, sure.
Segue it nicely, yeah. So this is our second Cyclocross Q&A episode, because the first one we did a couple weeks back.
Overwhelming demand.
Moderately whelming, I'd say. Whelming demand.
Well,
perhaps.
maybe we have a low tolerance for the demand, so it's
There
high. It's high relative to our capacity.
Great, perfect, beautiful. Anyway, we got a bunch more follow-up questions, so we wanted to kind of do a second round of these, because cyclocross is, as we said in the first episode, one of my absolute favorite things, and it's a really fun sport to talk about. And I think the energy demands on it, the gear demands, it's all just really interesting.
I would say so. Yeah, like it's a sport that you can certainly be quite fit, riding your trainer or riding on the road, and then just be completely not even part of the thing if you don't have the gear or the setup or the strategy or the start position. And
then flip side, you can have all the skills and all of the gear, but if you don't have any, like the fitness, you're gonna get left behind on the start line.
Right. Or just as the race goes on, right?
So it's just such a demanding sport pretty much from every level. So I think it's such a good one to really dig into, even if you don't necessarily do cyclocross. Anyway, so the first question is, so cyclocross, for those who are newer to it, often involves a lot of double weekends, and you can pretty much during the season race every weekend. And, as it's gotten crept earlier and earlier, like oftentimes you go pretty much from the end of your mountain biking road, whatever summer season, pretty much directly into racing twice a weekend in cyclocross. And everyone gets really, really psyched at the beginning of cyclocross season, because cyclocross is really fun. You get to see all your friends. The racing is a really good time, but it's also a huge demand, and not just on your body that weekend, but then the recovery and the gear cleaning and the gear replacing and all of that. So everyone gets really excited about it for the first 2 or 3 weekends, and then by weekend 4, they're starting to feel really burned out already. So the first question was kind of like, what do you do when you're not even a third of the way into your season and you're already feeling like, ugh, it's done.
Are we there? Like you're already burnt out, or how do we avoid it?
I guess both.
Oh, okay. I think some of this comes back to like, what is the actual goal of the year, right? So some people, the weather's good usually on the first month, that's September, October. So maybe that's fine. Maybe you just go hard on that. You're fit, and those are the fun races. They're clean. It's not as hard on equipment. You don't maybe need 2 bikes. It's certainly faster cleanup. Your energy's maybe high if you haven't burnt already from the summer events. So maybe that's fine, and then that's your goal. Like maybe you just stop racing come October, November once the weather gets, and that's how a lot of years we would do it, because I only had 1 bike, and I didn't really care so much about the mudding and stuff. So sort of we got 1 mudder in, and then the bike was busted, and that was the end of it, right? So I guess that could be one goal. But if your goal is, okay, I want to make it to nationals, which for Canada is sort of November, early November. Or if you're in the US, I think it's December now, right?
Yeah, they're back to
And that's
December.
probably most of our listeners, right? So I mean, I think if that's the goal, then I would certainly be selective about what events, for qualifying, what events are the highest quality. You certainly put a fun factor. But I think for most working people, the doubles are tough. It's
I think we start out real strong, and we probably shouldn't. Like, it's
yeah.
probably better to
So
start the
many people,
season
they
with,
have
like,
kids that are going, and it's you're off work on Friday, you're prepping bikes, you may be doing an opener workout. It's very quickly late at night. Dinner's disrupted. You have to be at the race probably really early. Long day. You want to stay and cheer. If you have family members, friends, and stuff, right? It's long, and then you're sort of clean up the gear, have it back for Sunday. So, and then it's all of a sudden you're back at work Monday. So then it's like, if we're talking about that, like how much energy do you have to train and recover and all this stuff throughout the week, right? You can see how that, like, oh, it's fine for one weekend, but then that next week gets tough. So I think if you have to do doubles, and that sometimes is the circumstance for qualifying or fun or your goals or whatever, then just being careful with maybe use a off day on a Monday, or partial off day to get cleaned up and slept.
and just how many doubles you do. Like, to me, it really, like, a month should, and this is totally, like, off the cuff. I think a month should really only have, like, 4 hard races in it.
I think it's tough. Like, I just finished Meb's. I'm not even going to pronounce his last name. I just tried to look it up, and I'm not going to try. But Meb, who's like the most famous of the U.S. marathoners, like he did 26 marathons in his life, like his career, his storied career. He won 2 of them. I don't want to misrepresent that. 2 or 3, but had some great performances in there. But like, he is like highly celebrated as a marathoner, right? 26 in his career.
Yeah.
Right. And he would do other races, shorter races in the season, but like the number of races are so few. And I don't know. I think you could make an argument either way that, us regular people can do a bit more because we're not pushing quite as hard, but it's like we take longer in a marathon aspect. No one's doing 2-hour marathons like Meb. So I think we just need to be careful because he also, like, isn't cleaning stuff necessarily afterwards.
He's not going to work.
He has people handling stuff. Once he had kids, his wife was, obviously a big part of that and handled and was willing to do a lot of that stuff. So if you're handling any of that, I think we just need to be careful, right? And it's a downer because, like, we want to support the organizers. We want to be out there supporting our community.
I mean, I've said it a million times.
You can volunteer.
Like, you can volunteer.
Yep. Single day race. So I think just without being a downer, I think just look at your goals. We're going through a bunch of goal setting right now with a lot of my clients, not so much the cyclocross ones, but a few of them, and just revisiting and thinking, okay, like in a couple of years, who do I want to be? What do I want to do in sport? And that's global and pretty fuzzy. What next year, next block, what are the like outcomes I want? So that could be, I want to win nationals. And then some process goals for that. I need to increase my power. I need to learn how to bunny hop a barrier or like even a 2x4. I can't bunny hop at all. So that's a goal. I want to go in. And then there's like some habits for like this week, this month, we're going to pull out of that as far as like, okay, I'm going to go get coaching because I've been trying to pop this barrier and I can't figure it out. So I'm going to get coaching. That was a sort of a plug, but there you go. I want to increase power. So I need to do I'm going to commit to one good threshold workout on the trainer. I'm going to do it every Wednesday. I'm going to like block this out. That's that sort of process goal. And then that then fills in, okay, well, if I'm going to do that, then what races can I fit in, right? And sort of scheduling wise, what makes sense towards that goal for nationals? What makes sense towards that threshold goal? Does it make sense to get a threshold workout in and maybe an endurance workout a couple weekends and skip racing? Mm-hmm. And that's with start position stuff. So I think just sometimes backing out, like, do I need to do all these races or am I just getting caught up in the excitement, which is hard and we all do, but
yeah.
Right. And sometimes that's fine. There's lots of people that their goal is, I have clients like this. I want to race every single race, just try and keep me healthy and like try and keep fitness from not decreasing and just like falling away. Right.
Well, and as long as they're still excited, that's awesome. It's really just like kind of monitoring. I think this is a self-monitoring thing. Like after every weekend, kind of that assessment of like, am I still feeling good? Am I still feeling excited? Was I dreading?
Well, and maybe that's a way. So let's
race?
say, okay, maybe some people are nodding their heads like, I want to I want to be that person that's just holding on, throughout the week and racing all weekend. I have the weekends off. That's what I do. That's social. That's where my family is. I want to be at all those and I want to race. So then those people, I think, are the ones that like, you can't do a lot during the week, right? This is very much like recovery, maybe a bit of endurance, maybe some like spin ups, like 3x30 second spin ups, maybe like there's just not a lot of intensity. I would pull any midweek stuff. Like you got to pick where you're doing this stuff, right? I think you got to be careful.
Yeah, I think a lot of the people that we run into that are dealing with what we'll call cyclocross burnout are the ones that are doing doubles on the weekend and like a Wednesday night. They might even be going to like a Tuesday or Thursday kids practice or something.
Yeah, and I think if you're young and you don't have stuff, maybe that can work. Do you think? Maybe better. You get away with
maybe
more.
Better, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that also depends on who you are as a person at that midweek race.
Sure.
So, I used to go to the Rutgers. So when I was first getting into cyclocross, I was on Rutgers cycling. We had a Wednesday night practice. But honestly, it was, an hour of a bit of drills and then like a few hot laps. But like, we didn't take it seriously.
Right. And maybe you could just focus on, the first 5 pedal strokes of the start and then just like, pick your fight, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. It was like a play race and like no one was a jerk about it. No one was like really going super hard and like trying to, elbows out. Except with the exception, and I'm going to say it, Mike Garrigan would show up to our practice occasionally and then suddenly
maybe that's
the pace
important.
would pick up. But luckily I was not part of the that crew, so I was kind of just behind them.
Yeah, so I think just looking at, how are you doing? We all have, because you're sort of thinking optimistically about yourself, right? But you're like, okay, well, how have I done in the past? What did I feel like in November last year?
I was also probably already so burned out because the last year I raced cross, I raced an Ironman and like on Sunday and showed up to cross practice on Wednesday and started racing the next week. So at no point was I not burned out. I should also just add that caveat.
Yeah, so I think just being wary of that, right, and picking and choosing your battles. I think Molly's point about you can go do some of these things and help out. Maybe even the cross practice, you're more there setting up stakes and helping that way. I have a couple clients that go and sort of help, lead the women's ride. They're women who are quite good, and so they go and just sort of give back that way, and that's probably very energetic, and they feel really good about that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, what is the goal? And then just how are you doing right now? Tweak something, pull out a race, pull out a night of being out and about, pull out an interval session. Often the less this time of year, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
We can start accumulating again after race season.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's lots, I think, waxing poetically or not so much.
Okay, let's talk some gear stuff because, again, cyclocross, gear heavy sport. So first question we got is just over the years, what are some good, basically like free speed hacks that we've gotten?
Yeah, a couple questions sort of in this direction, right? We all want the quick fix, I guess, right? But there are some things that I think sometimes people don't realize, right?
I was going to say cyclocross is actually one of the few sports where I do think like there are some good gear hacks that make a difference. To be honest, like for me, tire pressure was like this game-changing thing where I'd heard for years that tire pressure mattered.
So the tire pressure gauge,
and
getting a digital gauge for
finally,
mountain, really any off-road discipline. I feel like if you need that, tire pressure is pretty critical to not crashing, like sliding out on stuff, braking, comfort. So for cyclocross, especially if you're using like a actual cyclocross tire, like under 33 or whatever it is, it's not a lot of tire, no matter what type of tire you're using. So the tire pressure makes a huge difference in cornering. So getting a digital gauge, which we've linked to a bunch and talked about on the podcast, but
I think the Toe Peak
one's the one I like. Yeah.
Under $30 on Amazon.
Yeah. And for cyclocross, the only exception is that like it doesn't do like decimal points. So some people get that, like they want to do 26.5, and with the smaller tire, it is slightly different. I never cared that much. But that's the only exception with the Toe Peak, is it doesn't go quite that fine.
Yeah, I just don't know of any that are super, super good that are also reasonably expensive. And like that Toe Peak one is bomb proof. Like that thing has seen some things.
Yeah, it's usually I lose it before I break it, so which maybe isn't saying much.
Okay, so tire pressure.
Toe spikes. I always forget about them, but if you're doing any running uphill on sand or mud, which is cyclocross.
Anyone who didn't have toe spikes in Waterloo at the World Cup last weekend.
Oh, that would have been hilarious.
Literally sliding down the hill. Like there was one point where I think it was Katie Compton even had toe spikes in.
Oh, yeah.
And just couldn't get enough purchase. And the 15-time national champion is just sliding down this hill trying to claw her way up.
Well, that one was really steep. Yeah. Yeah. If you haven't watched the replays or highlights from the Waterloo World Cup, it was, as far as like what is cyclocross, it's probably a good one. But yeah, you can get toe spikes to screw into the toes of your shoes. It's sort of like rugby cleats work, I think, as well. I remember doing that. But now I would imagine online, like I know Jeremy Powers used to always get like some specific. There's a couple of brands out there that make different like forms. Like there'll be like a flattened one or a rounded one.
Cross-country running spikes also work for this.
Yeah, it's a pretty standard screw size hole, and then it's really just like a spike in two spikes in your toes.
I think the caveat to this one is not leaving your toe spikes in. Like they're really for muddy, icy, like crappy races, but they're not going to be super helpful if it's a dry day and there's not a really steep hill where you're going to need them. So
I think especially if they're like serious big ones, because they do affect running. Not that you would run on pavement or anything, but like a hardened surface, it's like weird. It's almost like having a road shoe on because your toe gets stuck up if it can't puncture into the ground.
So just they're on and then they're off. Oh, and make sure you put the little screw back in the holes when you take them off, because otherwise you will clog them with mud and it will be like next to impossible to get the toe spikes back in.
I think changing, on the note of shoes, changing your cleats maybe just even once like ahead of cyclocross season, just so your shoe cleats are to clip into your shoes, your pedals, I should say. That's often overlooked. In cyclocross, you're clipping in and out a lot, and you're walking around a lot. So those cleats go through a lot. So I think even if you're serious about cross and you're one of these people going to like late November, December, I would even do a mid-season change, maybe having 2 sets of shoes. I try and push. Most of my clients are what I would call, I'm sort of making this umbrella term of off-road. Like no one's racing road for the most part. There's a few who do crits and stuff, and for sure then to each their own. But I try and push like just no road shoes. And I think,
like that.
I think just because like I decided this early in my career that I'd just rather have 2 sets of mountain bike shoes so that when they get wet, or I'm traveling or whatever, I have options. But then also just if you're thinking the importance of clipping in and out to cyclocross. So you have your start, everyone, I can never clip in. I don't know how to clip in. I didn't get clipped in. Race was ruined. I didn't clip in. So like when you think about how frequent people talk about that, I couldn't clip in running in mud. Like my cleats got all bunged up and I didn't know how to unclip. So how much that comes into our language and stories of the race, to me, I have a hard time saying, okay, well, go and learn a completely different way to clip into those pedals in your limited amount of time you have to train. Go and do that. When you're on the trainer all winter and you clip in and out and you're doing one legs, do that with the road shoes and don't practice your mountain bike, right? I just have a hard time with that logic especially when we're very time crunch. If you're an elite and you're getting paid, do whatever you want. I am not a road racer, but for us time crunch people, I think it makes a lot of sense if you're not seriously racing road. Like I've gone in stage races. There's lots of people that race with mountain bike shoes. I think Specialized or GCN did like a good comparison between the two, and they couldn't really find, it wasn't a compelling reason to even use road shoes.
No, like I've always been mountain shoes. I also just find them more comfortable on my feet, to be totally honest. But
yeah, the only thing people say is like on a long ride they feel like it's more stable and maybe their foot doesn't get numb or something. But then you'll hear just as many people talk about the stiffness makes their foot go numb.
Yeah, exactly.
And then they're falling downstairs at the coffee shop, and I don't know.
Anyway, the only other thing with pedals that I was thinking about is it was an old hack of like spraying a little bit of PAM or.
Yeah, I don't know. Has that been debunked?
I don't know that it's been debunked.
We used to always
I've done
do that.
It, yeah.
That was so, yeah.
So if the race is particularly muddy.
That bike-less stuff works pretty well too. Like any polish on your bike, I guess.
Yeah, basically just giving your pedals like a little squirt of, WD-40 or PAM or whatever. Yeah. Really helped just kind of keep them moving, keep them from getting as bunged up, we'll say, with mud.
And worth practicing, right? We had a muddy race. I think a bunch of races were muddy, I should say, over these last couple of weeks around the world. But just practicing getting your feet into mud and running in mud, and just like it's hard with trail advocacy and not ruining parks, but figuring it out before the race, or maybe that's a reason. Like if you're like, oh, it's muddy today, I'm sad it's muddy for this race I'm going to. Well, treat it as practice, if nothing else.
Actually, I'm sort of sad I'm not racing cross this year, because I was thinking about this exact thing the other day. We were walking on the beach in Ocean City, and my sister hadn't walked on a beach in years. just because she's been too busy with work to come down to the beach at all. So we were out for a walk yesterday morning, and she was having the hardest time. And she's like, my calves are killing me. My hips are killing me. Like, because it was pretty soft sand and her feet were like sinking into it.
Yeah.
So almost like it would be running through mud. And all I could think was like, man, I'd be so good at cyclocross right now because I have actually put in a lot of time on sand this summer.
Sand is a great way to expose whatever is limiting you. Yeah, it's challenging. Like I always struggle with my feet and ankles, and I don't know. I find it's also forgiving in some ways. Like I always find personally that it's like you feel the niggles, but I never find that it like I've had it like, oh, like it just like this injury's gone to complete, got like worse.
No, I think it just like brings awareness to whatever.
We talked to Jax Marioche on a podcast about desert racing, so that might be an interesting one to go back and find. I'll link to it in the show notes, but she races like in deserts for very long distances, and we talked a bunch about sand and sand running. So if that's something you're keen on, but we were talking about getting so when your cleats, when they get muddy, people get really, really frustrated about this, but the trick is that you need to like think down and back, like more of like a back and a very like loose, like floppy foot when you're hitting your shoe. So you can't have like, people will do it like really angrily and really like down with a stiff ankle, but you need to think like whipping your toe. I'm doing a very odd motion with my wrist right now to try and like as if you're like slapping a bug or something, but almost backwards. Because if you're going very stiff and down, you're like, in my brain at least, you're smashing the mud into the cleat and you're not cleaning the cleat. So first you're thinking like trying to whip out anything out of your shoe and hitting the pedal and spinning the pedal almost.
Sort of picture a horse.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. Like, even if you think about like, I want to spin the pedal with my toe, like, and hit the cleat, then the pedal will like get it jarred and spin. And then your cleat will also like be able to clear backwards basically without the pounding it in with the shoe, and then you can try and like wiggle your foot into the cleat. That combined with just using those shoes and cleats all the time, I think really helps. Like there's the odd time, sure, it freezes and it's like you're in trouble, but I think if you think about like spinning the pedal with like a very loose floppy foot, you will have better luck.
Weird, but okay, I'm here for it. Any other gear hacks?
We talked about bottles. I mean, there's lots of bottles now. Like cyclocross generally doesn't have bottles on the bike. So bottle in your back pocket, at practice works okay. Throwing it, using it as a pylon works. But if you're going actually on a training ride, it can be annoying sort of strapping those bottles. Like you've always had a magnetic thing where the whole cage goes onto like a little magnetic bracket, and then the cage.
The bottle.
There is no
mounts.
Cage. Right. And it just snaps onto this like, and there's many variations of that.
Yeah, there's
Velcro,
like some Velcro
bottles.
ones.
I don't know what else I've been using with gravel now. I think that's somewhat informing some of the cyclocross. Like I pretty much just ride with my my pack when I do go on training rides right now, because we're doing there's cyclocross practice during the week and stuff. So yeah, if you're someone who's raced gravel, like you just throw that pack on and go do your endurance ride. I think it's sort of simplified some of this, right? And if you were going to stop and do cross practice, there's a pylon. You just take your pack off and throw it on the ground, right?
Mm-hmm. I think that's a good one.
So feeding for that, I think, is good. Is there any other quick cyclocross?
Oh, I have one that's very tiny. This is for kind of anyone actually racing, is when you get the numbers, so you get your numbers and they have 4 little tiny holes on the sides, and that's what you normally would put your pins through.
Right.
So instead of putting your pins through the little holes, you actually like double, like you stick the pin through the paper twice. So in through your skin suit and then out.
Yeah.
This just makes it lay a lot flatter and a lot neater, and you're more aerodynamic, but also it's just less likely to come like rip off and like start flapping in the wind.
Right.
It's a weird thing that I've only ever really seen like road racers do it, so cyclocrossers do it. But I was at a running race and I had like 3 people come up to me and be like, "What are you doing with your numbers?"
Right.
And I kind of explained to them, and they were like, "Oh my god, that's genius!"
Yeah, it definitely really works. Funny thing works really nice having those pins laying flat.
Yeah.
So you sort of, if you picture it on top of your jersey, you put the pin through just the like anywhere really on the paper, but sort of beside, like forget about the holes, not through the holes, down through the paper, through your shirt, back up through your shirt, back up through the paper, and then repin it, and then the pin lays really flat, and you sort of get 2 holes for the price of 1, and the pin sort of provides this stiffness to the paper, right?
Yeah, so that's my hack.
That's a good one. We're going to do some stuff. The other question was about sort of setting up the car and not having it so crazy. So that's sort of hacks in a way. So do you want to transition to that one?
I do, yeah. So this is my like absolute favorite question. Someone asked how to organize gear for cyclocross because she feels like every time she races, the car is just like a complete mess by the end of the weekend. And I mean, first of all, unfortunately, like that's just kind of the nature of the beast, especially honestly, as it gets colder and crappier out.
Right.
I think the tendency becomes more and more to, instantly just start throwing crap in the car just to get warm and out of the rain as fast as possible.
Mm-hmm.
But I came up with a list of sort of some of my things. She was asking about like, oh, do you use storage bins and all that stuff? And so what I've kind of figured out over the years is the best system is actually just like something that's going to be versatile enough that it's easy to carry in places and it's easy to maneuver and break down. And I've tried plastic bins. I really like the aesthetic of like a car that's full of like very neatly piled and organized plastic bins, but it's not really practical, especially if you're staying at a hotel or host housing or something and, all of your stuff is like neatly stored in bins, but now you have to bring these bins inside to a host house. Like it's kind of weird. So I think while bins are really nice and look great, they end up being kind of useless after a while. And they just take up more space, right? Like if you have an empty bin that's just sitting in your car, like half full or, it's half full or whatever, you're wasting that space. So what we do now is we both have pretty giant duffel bags and we can maybe even link to one of them, like one of the cheap ones on Amazon. It's just like a big canvas bag with like one zip, like the simplest bag you can possibly imagine, but like large and with a really wide zipper opening. And then in that, we use a lot of smaller bags. So smaller mesh bags that have kind of different stuff in them, right? Like Peter has a designated glove bag in his.
Yeah, there's like glove and then warmers and then like a shorts jersey one and then cold weather stuff. If it's for cross or something like in the winter, I'd have like, I call it the holy SHIT bag. And that's just like really warm weather, like really like the full
really cold weather.
I guess more so. And the like rain, so like full rain pants, like waterproof pants, waterproof jacket, winter jacket, usually another winter jacket, and maybe some like a toque, a woolen hat, if you will, and yeah, just anything that like is a little extra. But I usually throw one of those bags in, and then there'll be like a clothes bag of my clothes for just walking around.
Yeah. For water bottles, the organizational thing we've found is a lot of wine stores, if you get like 6 bottles of wine, not that I'm suggesting anyone should go out and buy 6 bottles of wine. Sometimes they give you like a cloth bag that holds the 6 bottles. Right. And it has like 6 little compartments. Those are super nice for organizing your water bottles. Peter actually has like a hard plastic one.
Yeah, if you look at a hockey store or a lacrosse store, or probably any team sports would have this, like we have Played Against Sports, or what would be another sort of chain in the States, I don't know, Source for Sports or something. Any of those like places, they'll have like, and they're pretty big often, like a goalie bottle or a hockey bottle is a little bigger diameter, but they'll have a plastic thing that you can put bottles in, so like a bottle carrier, and you can get really deluxe ones because like a full hockey team's trainer would have to carry like 24 bottles, so that's maybe more than you need. But I would go look at that, like some of those stores, if you go and think about your sport, when you go to them, you can like really repurpose a lot of, like we're talking about, basically we have hockey bags that we filled with tinier, shoe bags, helmet bags, and then we're talking about a water bottle holder, that's plastic, and then we were talking about rugby cleats. You could probably outfit yourself quite well for cyclocross. You could get pylons and cones for practice. It's
true.
Agility stuff, right? There'd be a whole.
Well, and then I actually also like going to more of like a Home Depot-y type store
for bins.
So bins, but then what I think what we got really turned on to with years of working with Aspire and the mechanics is that they always had kind of almost like fishing tackle boxes that held like the tiny pieces, right? Like the tiny extra screws, the tow spikes,
right?
Like all of the little stuff, cabling, any of the small bike specific stuff, they'd have in these little fisherman tackle boxes or like handyman boxes. I'm not describing it super well, but
Mm-hmm.
I think that was probably like the most organized I'd ever seen someone.
Yep. Yeah, that's definitely if you have tools or like Molly's saying, even just the shoe parts and that sort of stuff. And I guess in my bike bag too, I do have like a bag that just has like the miscellaneous accessories. So like a light, my sunglasses case would be in there, chamois cream, that sort of stuff. And that's in like another bag.
Yeah.
I put pins and just sort of like put the pins through that because you're always looking for pins and zip ties. But the car, so I think
So the other
some people
thing-
would have a rack, right? So a rack outside. So that might be a solution for some people.
The other thing, so then, I was thinking about keeping it clean. So kind of that post race, like it's muddy. So we talked about this a bit on the last show. I find a camp shower, especially like they're like $10. They're giant black bags basically, and you can put them on your hood of your car. And even when it's cold out, it will actually warm up pretty well if it's in the sun. They're great for being able to just hose yourself down a little bit after the race. If it's super muddy, it's really nice to just be able to rinse off with warm water instead of try to like scrape mud off with a towel. And then a little weed sprayer or some, small sprayer type thing just to be able to rinse off your bike in the parking lot is really, really helpful because often the pressure washers are really hard to get to. Or, you're walking all the way across the course and now by the time you've rolled your bike back, somehow it's muddy again. So having that's really nice just to be able to quickly clean. The other thing I was thinking about is actually getting a smaller, like I say black tarp because I really don't like how the blue ones look. But if you get like a small, like 6x9 foot black tarp, you could actually just put that down in the back of your car before the weekend starts just to kind of protect your upholstery. So no matter what mud and stuff gets kicked in, and mud and stuff will get kicked in, you can just take that and shake it out at the end of the weekend.
Right.
Having garbage bags on hand is the other really big thing.
Yeah, for clothes or shoes.
Like get that wet stuff into a garbage bag like before it touches your car.
Well, I was going to say some people will do, again, at Home Depot, you can get buckets that have screw-on tops. So they're pretty, like if they fell over in the car, I mean, you could fasten them or position them in the car so they ideally wouldn't fall over. But if you get one of those screw-on tops and put hot water with suds in it, then you can sort of come back and have a sponge and sort of clean yourself off.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And then I've seen people just like it's already suds, so you just drop your clothes, even your shoes in, and then it's at least staying wet.
Yeah, because the big thing you don't want to do is let your clothes dry dirty, because once they dry when they're muddy, it's stained. So even actually with the garbage bag, just make sure you kind of twist the top if you are just using a garbage bag for wet stuff, just so it isn't getting a ton of air in it, so it won't actually dry. Like it'll stay wet for a long time if it's in a sealed garbage bag.
Yeah, I wouldn't leave that for too long. This stuff gets musty.
No,
really.
Get to that quickly. But and then the only other thing I thought about was just I'm a huge fan of just having black or brown towels on hand. I've seen so many people just destroy white towels, or the nice like yellow towels that they had in the bathroom at home that they threw in the car, just week after week. Like, man, you can get some cheap black towels that they hide grease, they hide mud. I'll do a little shout out. I have a really good Shred Girls beach towel right now. That's kind of my new favorite cyclocross accessory. Because it's Shred Girls, but it's also mostly black, so it is good for hiding that bike grease. But yeah, whatever you have, just some rags and some black towels. And if you care about the aesthetics of how like messy your car looks, I feel like black and brown towels just don't look quite as grungy by the end of the weekend.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Just having junky towels is probably an asset.
So that was kind of the ones I thought about. Anything to add?
I don't know. It really depends on the car, right? Like some people will have full-size vans that you can sort of just like wash it. But I think your thought about either a old blanket or a towel even a towel, but a tarp in the back is a great one.
Yeah. I'm also going to do this whole thing that we just talked about in an article over on the Outdoor Edit with links to all of the stuff that I would recommend. So if anyone wants to check that out, that's going to be up later this week. Just because this is a topic that I love so much. I'm organizationally obsessed. So
some people will get too. I mean, you start building out how many things you have in your car, and this is why cyclocross is crazy. But that just having like some sort of pop-up tent or like large umbrella type thing that you could sort of if you're going to set up a trainer behind your car, that's sort of a common setup, right? So trying to figure out that sort of stuff. Like, can you sort of set yourself up a little bit of a tent in the parking lot to warm up and stay warm and dry off and change and this sort of stuff, right? Like that. If you're serious about this and spending a lot of time at those races, it might be worth, getting something. You can get those tents now relatively affordably. So
awesome. All right, next question is a real quick one. Someone asked me about rain boots for cross. I admit I used to be one of those people that ended up, I think I've probably bought like 10 pairs of, $15 galoshes over the years because, the cheap like rubber galoshes are kind of a pain in the butt to travel with because they take up a ton of space. Like if you're flying, like
right.
It's so hard to pack galoshes. So I would end up not bringing them places like Austin, Texas for nationals where it was going to be dry and sunny and 70 degrees and have it pour rain and have to go to the store and try to find galoshes, which were very hard to find in Texas where it doesn't really rain that much. So I've spent a lot of money over the years on just rebuying galoshes. But then I have kind of two options now that I really like. I have a pair from Vivo Barefoot that I love because they pack down to almost nothing. So I can shove them into a carry-on bag if I'm flying. And yeah, they don't take up any space. I was so happy to have them in Madison. They're also easier to run around in. So the problem with like the cheap galoshes that you'd get at, Home Depot or Walmart or wherever is that they don't bend at all. So if you're in the pit or you're trying to run around the course or anything, it can be really uncomfortable to try to get around in regular galoshes. So I like kind of folding pairs. So they don't make the ones that I have anymore, but I found a couple of travel-friendly ones that are just, are really soft
rubber. They did
rubber.
re-release it. Did you see that? Yeah.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah.
Oh, so we'll link to that one. But I also found a couple on Amazon that are a little cheaper, that are more travel-oriented. So they're still rubber galoshes, but they just bend a lot more than traditional ones. So I find them... yeah, definitely the best. Or if it's cold weather you're thinking about, investing in a pair of bogs is the best thing I've ever done. They have neoprene outers and then like rubber bottoms, but they're really, really warm. They're super waterproof and they bend with you because from the ankle up, they're neoprene. So they actually are easier to run around in. If you are a female with feet smaller than, I'm going to say like 8.5, maybe, you can actually wear kid sizes. So you can get them for pretty much like half price. So that's my little hack there. I have a pair of children's ones that have lasted me for 7 or 8 years now, and they're amazing.
Yeah, I think it's as someone who's very resistant to having too many things and too many shoes, if you're going to do cyclocross, you pretty much need some sort of rain boot, waterproof pant, waterproof jacket, maybe a hat, some gloves, a lot of different types of gloves actually. So I think start with just don't overthink the boots. I think probably insulated boots, like if you go to a farm store or something, they usually have a good selection of different types of rubber boots because farmers spend a lot of time in rubber boots. Talking to a farmer about what boots they wear is often maybe a good strategy. But yeah, you need your enjoyment of the weekend. If you're going to be the person we talked about in the beginning who's at these races constantly, it's only a matter of time. And if you can just pull that stuff out, it's like it's not even raining, right? Once I got waterproof boots and pants, and I would just start, like I just walk around town when it's pouring rain because I can, right? So it's pretty big game changer. So definitely look into your boot, pant, jacket strategy.
Yeah. Okay, this one you might have some feelings on. Can we talk about the benefit of switching from clincher to tubeless? So not tubular. This guy does not have multiple sets of tires for cross, or
right.
He just doesn't have multiple wheel sets. He's not gonna have 3 sets of tubulars. So he's looking much more like, okay, he has clinchers now. Is there a point to going tubeless?
I mean, I think you could, if there's some budget, I think you could run tubular just in a middle of the road diamond tread, what I would like a Griffo in challenge tires. So not a full-on mud tire, and certainly not a semi-slick like diamond tread or file tread, I should say.
That's still a pretty big cost commitment, though, I'm going to argue, because the tires themselves, Griffo's totally reasonable price for a tire, but you also then have to buy tubular wheels for that.
Yeah, you're definitely in for minimum
the glue,
$1,000. I mean, I think the price is becoming more reasonable, but yeah, it's certainly an outlay. It is beneficial. I don't know really how to quantify it, but
Yeah, to me, I'm actually still pretty much clinchers. Like I've raced on tubulars and I like them, but ultimately, for what I do, and it sounds like for what this guy does, like clinchers still make sense.
I asked Powers, and I don't know if he would accept this quote still, but I asked him way back when he was, up at the front of World Cups and races in general, and he thought like the difference would be he would still be able to be on the lead lap, but like would not be at the front of the race anymore.
In the men's World Cup in Europe.
Right, but there's definitely like a percentage point or two there, right? So I don't know if that expands. There's still a price, and there's still, you're still trade off between what do you do when it rains or when it's, really dry. I think a lot of people in most of the races could get away with one, but you are like, it's going to flat and it's going to cost money. It's not perfect in every condition. So tubeless, a lot of people find it's still finicky. I think it's gotten a lot better, and it's one of those things. I saw it in mountain biking. Like I think you just got to sort of give it a chance, but I personally, I would just stick still for the sake of ease and expense, and just compatibility with just sort of Challenge makes sort of a cotton sidewalled clincher tire. You use a tube inside. Some people use latex tubes. I can't be bothered. But
I think
yeah,
that's actually probably the best point is just the tube, like the actual tires themselves that you can use if you're running clinchers versus tubeless. I think the tires themselves are much better and more supple compared to what the tubeless ones are.
Yeah, and I mean rims have changed a little bit. You can maybe go a bit wider, especially if your tires aren't getting measured, right? I think that's the thing that is getting missed still in cyclocross is most people's tires never get measured. So you have the option to go wider, which would enhance how good the tubeless tire is, I think, because I think that's what still is tough when the tubeless tire is really small volume. It's maybe more subject to getting pulled off the rim and stuff. But I think if you can run wider tires, then maybe there's a tweak you can make there. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I would just run cotton sidewalled tires. And
yeah, rather than investing in a tubeless, like doing a tubeless setup, I would just invest in a nicer set of clinchers.
Yeah, that's what we have. We have mud and all around. I don't generally bother with file treads. But yeah, that's where I would go. But I think people are discounting tubeless just because it's been, like anything, sort of a early adoption. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's an answer for anyone, but
I felt like that answer.
I think if you have the budget, the tubulars are worth doing, but
yeah,
you got to be pretty into it.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, so this next one is less of a question and more of a comment from Kathy Herzog, who's on with us talking about athletes and anxiety a couple months back. And she races some cross in New England, so she's right in the heart of cyclocross in the U.S., or the former heart of cyclocross in the U.S. It's actually been really sad lately to see the number of UCI races leaving New England when that's kind of where the hub used to be, but right. That's neither here nor there. She wanted us to kind of address some etiquette stuff in cyclocross. So, last week or 2 weeks ago, we talked a bunch about pre-riding and how to do a pre-ride and stuff. And she made a really good point of, really make sure you can definitely pre-ride. That's a great idea, but make sure you're looking at the schedule and when your pre-ride window is, or rather when there's a pre-ride window that is not for you. Because there are pre-ride windows that are elite only, or even like women elite only or men elite only during the day. So really just making sure if you're not in that category, you're not getting on the course, because it's, pretty rude to do that. There's a reason those are designated as the times for those people. And the other thing is just being mindful of the fact that, they let you get on the course. So this is a really weird thing with cyclocross. So the first finisher crosses the line at the end of their race, and there's usually 20 minutes, say, before the next race. So the winner crosses the line, but there could still be people who are just starting the last lap, because cyclocross is a short course where you do multiple laps. So people then will get on the course after the finish line to pre-ride, but there are still people that are out there racing. So if you come up on one of them, they might be going slower than you're trying to pre-ride. That's not their problem. Like you are supposed to stay behind them and let them finish their race, because it's still technically like their time to be on course. So just being really mindful of other people on the course as you're pre-riding.
Yeah, and just be careful. I mean, I think there's both sides of it. Like when you're the person who's riding and you feel like someone's going to pass you, I think it's hard because often these people are newer or really nervous. But just try and not be too stressed about the people behind you, and just assume that they're going to be nice people a little bit. And you can be thinking, how are you going to let them pass? But you don't need to look at them, because I think sometimes the stress of like trying to look if they're going to pass you and stuff, then that throws that person off, right? The person who's being passed. So I think just trying to relax in that moment and think, okay, can I get to the side of the trail? And you can communicate that, but you don't need to be super nervous, I guess, or super tense, or throw yourself offline too much, which is easier said than done, but worth practicing.
So that's almost more in race, though.
In general, just if there was someone behind you, like usually you are in the lead, so you have the right of the way, and someone shouldn't run you off the trail. And it does happen, and I apologize for this.
Well, definitely not when you're racing and the person behind you is pre-riding.
So in that specific setting, that person shouldn't even know you're there.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you think, oh, I'll just ride behind them because they're just, you assume maybe that they like are really comfortable with people riding behind them, but they are very self-conscious in a lot of senses, or in a lot of situations. So it's better, just not to be on the course if someone's finishing their race. But if you are, and for some reason that's allowed, I would just try and be like 2 corners behind them. Like it's just, you're going in some ways you're going so slow relative to how you would maybe pre-ride if you're that super pro. Maybe you just shouldn't be on the course. Like, what are you doing that, right? So maybe just wait, or if there's a section of the course that's been cleared, maybe you could like trial that section a little bit while you're waiting, and just don't interact with those people at all, which includes drafting them, right? Like you can't just sit on someone because they're going to ask you if you want to get by, right? So I think just being courteous in that sense. Hopefully that makes sense. I don't want to sound like I'm telling the people at the back to like chill out or something, but what I'm saying is like race your own race and just assume people are generally good, and when they're not, then hopefully they're relegated for that.
Yeah, exactly. And then her other point was cyclocross is really interesting because if you're new to it and you have a mechanical, it might not occur to you that you can still finish your race. But I mean, there's a ton, like Kathy just wanted to kind of point out, like running with your bike in cyclocross is a totally accepted thing. So, if you have a mechanical, or, you flat your tire or whatever, and the pit's really far away, and, it's going to be a really long day if you run, you can still run and do it. And it's fine. Your race doesn't have to be over just because you've had a mechanical.
Yeah, I mean, maybe thinking too, if you're racing the double 2 days, then maybe you want to be careful running too much. Certainly if the race is, you might get pulled at some point, which is fine. That's often better, to be told to stop versus, quitting, so to speak. If there is pits, which there are in cyclocross twice a lap usually, then, working on getting something in the pits. I have some clients now with road bikes, they'll just put their road bike in, since it's disc, they'll put knobbier tires on it, and that might not be, they maybe have to be very delicate going around the course, but they can still sort of finish.
Yeah, or if you're in a master's category, like a mountain bike,
possibly. Yeah, just know the rules, right? It might be you might be able to put like your old set of wheels in there, and maybe it's not tubular, but give yourself that chance. And yeah, I mean, often running a 2K lap, and maybe you can, if it's a chain's broken or something, or it's a rear flat, sometimes you can ride in a couple grassy sections or scooter a little bit. So often you don't have to run the whole way. You can like sort of in a straight line, maybe ride a flat, again, depending on the terrain and stuff. So yeah, I mean, you may as well, you're there, right? And if you've driven all the way there and that's the one day, then you may as well go for a jog.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, cool. And then the last question here is how to use power, speed, heart rate, just any kind of measurable during a race.
I don't think I would for this race. There's maybe situations someone might, but yeah, I mean, it's so up and down. Like it would be feeling for sure.
I know a lot of elite racers will actually put tape over their
or in
Garmin
their pocket
screen.
Or on their watch. A lot of watches for sure, just so that when you switch bikes, your watch stays with you.
Yeah. Although, reminder in cross, just make sure. I don't really know of anyone that would wear their watch on their right hand, but just think about, you lift your, like how you lift your bike and stuff.
Yeah, certainly some watches run into your hand and stuff, like especially the big ones. Like I have a triathlon one, and it definitely like can give a good, like it sort of like rubs, I guess most is the issue.
So just kind of make sure you can move your wrist really easily in a lot of different ways without the watch being annoying.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, some people maybe would say, oh, you use like normalized power, but it's just you start as hard as you can, and then your first lap's as hard as you can, and then you settle in, and you just need to be, I think a lot of people, especially when they start talking about this, so this is more of a mountain bike discussion, or, road, maybe you can use it more. You're sort of pacing the climb, or once you're in the breakaway, you sort of, you can hold your threshold. So you TT it at that threshold or something. And that's something you've tried a lot in practice, but I think I would just be so focused on the next corner, and it's always just like the next corner is only a seconds away, right? Or the next dismount. So I don't see that data. What was that? There was 3 things. It was power, heart rate, and was there something
Speed.
else? No, I don't think so. I think it's interesting data. Like after the fact, maybe you can like see like your peak powers is what we look at, the 5, 10 second, 30 second, 60 second, maybe a 5 minute, maybe you look at the average and the normalized power for the race, but it depends a lot, right? If you run, what do you, I don't know.
Yeah, your average power gets dropped pretty hard if you're running a bunch of it.
Sure. Yeah, I think maybe in warm-up might be a place you could use some of that. You maybe have like targets you're going to, sit at, we talked last time about the 30-second, 45-second sort of warm-up efforts, especially on the trainer, people use it. You could do a 5-minute threshold effort. Again, just like you do, I try and always bring this back to what do you do in training? In your cyclocross, like things, do you use power? I don't know. I don't know if you do, but probably in your warm-ups you have an idea of sort of what that looks like. So if you do, I always say I want to get my heart rate up to so in my warm-up I like to see it at least at the average that I would usually race at. I always find my heart rate's a little slow to get going, so that's sort of what I set it at, and I always figure if I can get my heart rate to that average, at least I've touched that like race pace.
Right.
And usually that coincides with I'm warm, right? And I'm feel activated. And on a hot day, it's a lot easier to get my heart rate up, and I don't warm up as much, right? And so sometimes heart rate can be nice in that sense, like where are you at physiologically? But in the race, I wouldn't, like, it just would scare you, whatever you saw. It's either too low or too high. So I think for something short and super technical like cyclocross, in a general sense, I don't see a use.
Yeah, I agree. The only other thing that I would add, since we've been talking about gear a bunch, is if you do have a power meter on your bike, for God's sake, be careful with the pressure washers. This is such a big thing. I've seen so many power meters wrecked.
I think it's gotten a lot better, but yeah, it's same as like the linkages on mountain bikes and hubs and, headsets. You don't need to like pressure wash directly at it, even if it does mean, maybe you have to give it a little bit extra, like a scrub or a wipe down by hand.
Yeah.
Just like spraying the back of your power meter crank or.
Yeah, just be super mindful of that. And, if you have someone in the pit for you, just kind of maybe remind them.
Try and do the best you can. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's my last word.
You're asking a lot of that for sure. Yeah. Having seen some of the just like puddles, you're like power washing a bike sitting in a puddle.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. Well, I think we'll end it there. If anyone has any other cyclocross questions or any other questions in general, especially as we kind of head into the endurance sport off season, we have some cross country ski content coming up. We have some skiing content coming up in the next month or so. A lot of really interesting. Actually, we have a lot of really cool interviews that are going to come out in the next
some good
few
one
weeks.
on lock. Yeah.
I'm pretty excited.
If anyone has contacts or thinks they should be on the show, you probably just said that, but yeah, always looking for ideas and people, and thank you for reaching out. Comments, criticisms. Thanks for being here.
Direct criticisms to @Peter Glassford. Compliments go to @Molly
the form
J.
comes to
Herford.
me anyhow. I can filter it for you.
Yeah, thank you, dear. And then, as always, consummateathlete.com, @Peter Glassford, @Molly J. Herford. And thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you next week.